Don't call my son again, Etta. We never wanted a woman like Naomi dragging her low-class black blood into the Reed family in the first place. That was what Vivian Reed said to me on the second morning after my daughter's accident. Not whispered, not softened, not hidden behind prayer or church manners. She said it clear enough that I could hear the ice in her teeth. I was standing outside the ICU at Piedmont Hospital in Atlanta, holding a paper cup of coffee so cold it tasted like pennies. Behind the glass, my only child, Naomi Whitaker Reed, lay strapped beneath white sheets and blinking machines. Her neck was locked in a brace. A tube helped her breathe. Purple bruises had bloomed along her jaw and shoulder, like somebody had tried to erase her and failed halfway through. The doctor had told me the first 72 hours mattered most. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said gently, "your daughter is alive, but we need to watch the swelling. Her spinal injury is serious. We cannot make promises about movement yet." Movement. That word sat in my chest like a stone. Naomi was 39 years old, an architect. My child could sketch a house on a napkin and make you feel like you had already lived there. She had built her career one late night, one client meeting, one swallowed insult at a time. In rooms where people looked past her, she learned to make them look twice. She bought her own home in Sandy Springs before she ever married Grant Reed. She owned shares in her design firm. She had retirement accounts, investment accounts, insurance policies, and a name people respected. I was not rich. I was a retired school teacher from Decatur with a paid-off little brick house, a closet full of church dresses, and knees that knew when rain was coming. But I had raised Naomi to stand straight in a world that enjoyed bending women like us. Then came Grant. Grant Reed was smooth in the way polished wood is smooth, pleasant to touch, hard underneath. He came from the kind of Atlanta family that always had their picture taken near charity banners. His mother, Vivian, could enter a church fellowship hall and make every woman adjust her pearls. His brother, Preston, ran the Reed Development Company. His sister-in-law, Monica, planned fundraisers where the chicken was dry, the flowers were expensive, and everybody pretended not to count who gave what. At Naomi's wedding, I watched Grant smile while my daughter glowed beside him. Then I saw his eyes move across her house, not with wonder, with calculation. He looked at the staircase, the marble island, the tall windows facing the backyard. He looked the way men look at land before they decide what can be taken from it. I told myself not to be that kind of mother, not the suspicious one, not the woman who ruins her daughter's joy because fear has been sitting too long in her bones. So I stayed quiet. And now Naomi was lying in ICU after being run off Georgia State Route 9 on a rain-slick morning, her SUV crushed against a concrete barrier. And Grant had not called me once. Not once. I had called his phone 6 times. On the 7th, Vivian answered. After she said those words to me, I did not scream. I did not curse. I did not give that woman the satisfaction of hearing my voice break. I only said, "I heard you." And then I ended the call. A younger Etta might have cried right there against the hospital wall. A younger Etta might have begged, argued, demanded decency from people who had none to spare. But I was 59 years old. I had taught middle school for 32 years. I knew the difference between a bad child and a dangerous one. Bad children make noise. Dangerous children get quiet when they are planning something. I opened my purse and took out the small blue notebook I used for grocery lists and blood pressure readings. At the top of a clean page, I wrote the date, then the time, then Vivian reads exact words. My hand shook once, but only once. Through the glass, Naomi's chest rose with the machine's rhythm. My baby girl, who used to fall asleep with crayons in her fist, who had worked twice as hard for half the grace, who had trusted a man because love can make even smart women generous with danger. I pressed my palm to the glass. Mama is here, I whispered. A nurse passed behind me and slowed, maybe hearing something in my voice that sounded less like grief and more like a warning. I kept writing. Grant absent, Vivian hostile. No call from Reed family, Naomi unable to speak. Because a mother can cry later, first she had to remember. The first time I met Vivian Reed, she held both my hands like she had been waiting all her life to welcome me. Mrs. Whitaker, she said, smiling wide enough for the whole room, we are just so blessed Naomi came into Grant's life. She said blessed, the way some people say borrowed. We were at a Sunday luncheon in Buckhead 6 months before the wedding. White tablecloths, silver pitchers of sweet tea, baked chicken with rosemary, green beans cooked too soft, and peach cobbler served in little glass bowls, like nobody there had ever eaten from a paper plate. Vivian moved through that room like a woman born with a guest list in her hand. She remembered names, church committees, grandchildren's colleges, who had surgery, who had donated, and who needed to be flattered before the next fundraiser. Her oldest son, Preston Reed, stood near the windows talking about zoning approvals and revitalization. Men like Preston loved that word. It sounded cleaner than pushing people out of neighborhoods they could no longer afford. His wife, Monica, floated beside him in a cream dress, laughing at all the right moments. She had the tired eyes of a woman who had learned that smiling first could save her trouble later. And then there was Grant. Grant never raised his voice. That was his gift. A man could say ugly things softly and make people question whether they had heard him wrong. He called me Mrs. Whitaker in public, always polite, always careful. But when Naomi walked away, his face changed by half an inch. Not enough for most people to notice. Enough for me. Naomi was proud that day. She wanted me to see that Grant's people had accepted her. My daughter had spent years being the only black woman in boardrooms where men interrupted her, then praised her ideas when they came out of somebody else's mouth. So when Vivian praised her designs, when Preston said she had real vision, when Grant placed his hand gently at the small of her back, Naomi let herself breathe. I wanted that for her. Lord knows I did. But I also knew rooms like that. I knew when people were welcoming you, and I knew when people were studying where to place you. After lunch, Grant asked Naomi to show his mother pictures of the house. Naomi pulled out her phone, laughing, proud as any woman should be of something she built with her own money. Vivian looked at the images and said, My, that is quite a home for one woman. One woman. Not a talented woman, not a hard-working woman, just one woman, as if success without a husband was furniture left in the wrong room. Naomi did not catch it. Love had cotton in her ears. But I watched Grant lean closer to the screen. He looked at the tall front windows, the kitchen island, the back deck, the double garage. He did not say much. Just nodded, smiling that church boy smile. Solid property, he said. Not beautiful, not warm, solid. I felt something cold move through me. On the drive home, Naomi asked why I was quiet. I'm just tired, baby, I told her. That was not a lie. It was only too small to carry the truth. By the time the wedding came, I had almost convinced myself I was wrong. Grant danced with Naomi like she was the only woman in Georgia. Vivian dabbed her eyes during the vows. Preston gave a toast about family legacy, and half the room clapped before he finished. But near the end of the night, I saw Grant standing alone in Naomi's foyer, looking up the staircase. No music on his face then. No love either. Just numbers. A mother knows when a man is looking at her daughter. And a mother knows when he is looking past her. Before Naomi married Grant Reed, she sat at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, a laptop, and a stack of folders thick enough to make my old teacher heart proud. Mama, she said, tapping the papers, I'm not walking into marriage blind. But that was my girl. She had the house in Sandy Springs, the kind with high ceilings, a shaded backyard, and a kitchen big enough for Thanksgiving dinner. She had shares in the design firm she helped grow. She had investment accounts, retirement money, insurance policies, and contracts with clients who asked for her by name. None of that had fallen out of the sky. Naomi had earned it through long nights, sore feet, and rooms where men called her articulate, like they were handing her a prize. She had learned to smile without shrinking. She had learned to correct people without sounding angry, because black women in professional rooms are often punished for the tone other people imagine. That was why Mabel Hargrove mattered. Mabel was a retired real estate attorney, 72 years old, sharp as a sewing needle and twice as hard to fool. She had known Naomi since my daughter was a junior designer, trying to get her first commercial project approved. Keep your house separate, Mabel told her. Keep your business shares separate. Love the man if you must, but do not let romance do your bookkeeping. Naomi laughed when she told me that, but she listened. The deed stayed in Naomi's name. Her company shares stayed hers. Her main investment accounts were not mixed with Reed money. There was no big dramatic prenup fight, no screaming over a conference table, just quiet boundaries written properly. That was the part that let me sleep at night. Then Grant came with what he called grown folk planning, healthcare power of attorney, durable financial power of attorney, emergency access forms, a joint checking account for household expenses, papers that many married couples in America sign because life is uncertain and hospitals do not wait for family debates. Mama, it's standard, Naomi told me. If something happens to me, Grant needs to be able to handle bills, insurance, payroll issues, things like that. I wanted to ask why a woman with Mabel Hargrove in her corner needed Grant Reed holding any key at all. But Naomi was already defending him before I spoke. He's my husband. Those 3 words can be beautiful. They can also be a blindfold. The dangerous part was tucked inside the durable financial power of attorney. If Naomi was incapacitated for more than 30 days and 2 physicians confirmed she could not manage her own affairs, Grant could temporarily handle certain active investments, business obligations, insurance maintenance, and financial transactions considered necessary. He could not sell her house outright. He could not simply put her company's shares in his pocket. But he could move money through narrow halls. He could restructure accounts. He could pay obligations. And he could create pressure where there had been peace. Naomi saw safety. Grant saw access. Vivian, I believe, saw an unlocked side door. At the time, nothing looked criminal. That is how careful people do damage. They do not come through the front window with a brick. They arrive with a pen, a witness, and language nobody reads twice because everybody wants to believe love is enough. I asked Naomi one question. "Baby, did Mabel read every page?" And she smiled. "Most of it. Most of it." I have hated those 3 words ever since. Because not every betrayal begins with a lie. Some begin with a signature given to someone who should have protected you. By the 3rd morning, I knew the rhythm of the ICU better than I knew my own kitchen. The soft hiss of machines, the rubber soles of nurses moving fast without looking hurried, the little chime before an elevator opened, the smell of sanitizer sitting over everything like weather. I sat with my purse against my feet and my blue notebook in my lap. Naomi had not truly awakened. Every now and then her fingers twitched or her eyelids trembled, and my whole body leaned toward her like hope had pulled a string through my chest. Then nothing. Just the machine helping her breathe and the monitor counting what my prayers could not hold. A doctor with kind eyes came to speak with me after rounds. "Mrs. Whitaker, the next step is observation and reducing swelling. We are watching spinal response, respiratory strength, and neurological signs." Doctors have a language that sounds careful because careless words can ruin people. I nodded like I understood everything. Then I asked, "Who makes decisions if a decision has to be made today?" His face changed only a little. "Her husband is listed as medical power of attorney." I had known it, but hearing it inside that hallway made my knees feel old. "Grant Reed," I said. "Yes, ma'am." Ma'am. He meant respect. Still, it landed heavy. I was the woman who fed Naomi oatmeal when she had chickenpox. I was the woman who worked summer school to pay for her first drafting set. I was the woman who knew she hated grape jelly, slept on her left side, and hummed when she was thinking. But Grant Reed had the paper, and in a hospital, paper can stand closer than blood. Later that afternoon, a nurse named Lila stopped near the coffee machine while I was stirring sugar into a cup I did not want. She looked down the hall first. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said quietly, "I probably shouldn't say much." I turned to her. "Then say only what let you sleep tonight." Her mouth tightened. "Mr. Reed came by yesterday evening." My hand froze around the stir stick. "He was here?" "For a short time." "He saw Naomi?" "Briefly." That word did not belong to a husband. Lila lowered her voice. "He asked about documentation, insurance, whether there would be a formal incapacity assessment, who completed medical forms, things like that." And I waited. Sometimes silence is the only way to make truth step forward. "He didn't ask if she had opened her eyes," Leela added. "He didn't ask if she was in pain." and the hallway seemed to narrow. I thanked her, because women like Lila risk trouble by telling the truth in small pieces. Then I went back to my chair and wrote it all down. Grant visited. Short stay. Asked about documentation, insurance, incapacity. Did not ask about pain. Did not ask about consciousness. I underlined incapacity twice. Outside Naomi's room, a hospital chaplain passed with a Bible tucked under one arm. Somewhere down the hall, a family began crying. Not loud, just broken. The kind of crying that comes when the body finally understands what the mind has been refusing. I did not cry, not then. I looked through the glass at my daughter's bruised face and thought about Grant's polished shoes standing at the foot of her bed, his mind not on her breathing, but on forms. A man can fool a church. He can fool a room full of donors. He can even fool a woman who loves him. But when a wife lies broken in ICU, and the first thing her husband reaches for is paperwork, the truth has already raised its hand. On the fourth morning after Naomi's accident, rain tapped against the hospital windows like impatient fingers. I had slept in a vinyl chair with my coat over my shoulders and my shoes still on. My back ached, my eyes burned, but my notebook sat open on my lap, ready for whatever fresh ugliness the day wanted to bring. I called Calvin Price from the quiet end of the hallway, near a vending machine that hummed like it knew secrets. Calvin and I had gone to high school together. Back then, he wore thick glasses and carried 2 pencils behind his ear. Later, he worked for the county clerk's office long enough to know which public records mattered and which ones people hoped nobody would read. "Etta May," he said when he answered, "I heard about Naomi. I'm sorry." "Thank you, Calvin. I need a favor." He went quiet. Old friends know when grief is not the only thing in your voice. I gave him names: Naomi Whitaker Reed, Grant Reed, Reed Development Group, Vivian Reed, Preston Reed, anything recently filed, anything moving too fast. He did not ask why. That was why I called him. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed while I was standing outside Naomi's room, watching a respiratory therapist adjust a tube. Calvin said, "You sitting down?" "I'm standing." "Then lean on something." I placed one hand against the wall. "A filing came through from an attorney connected to the Reeds," he said. "Preliminary paperwork, not fully active yet. Looks tied to durable financial power of attorney, language about incapacity, and temporary management authority." The hallway chilled around me. When? 2 days after the accident. 2 days. Naomi still had glass in her hair 2 days after the accident. Her body was still deciding whether to stay in this world, and the Reeds were already walking paperwork toward her money. "Is it illegal?" I asked. "Not on its face," Calvin said. "That's the problem. If the document exists and the conditions are met, they can argue they're preparing responsibly." Responsibly. There are words people use when they want sin to wear a clean shirt. "What conditions?" I asked, though I already knew. 30 days of incapacity, 2 physicians. Then Grant can begin handling certain financial matters. When I closed my eyes, 30 days, not a lifetime, not a year, just long enough for a woman with a spinal injury to be trapped between pain medicine, hospital forms, and the man who had stopped asking, if she was alive. That afternoon, Grant finally appeared in the waiting area. He wore a navy suit, no tie, face arranged into grief. He hugged a deacon from Vivian's church before he came near me, as if witnesses needed to see his sorrow first. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said softly, "how is she?" I looked at him for a long second. Still here. His eyelid flickered. Before he could answer, a delivery woman arrived, carrying a tall vase of white lilies. The card read, "Praying for Naomi's full restoration. With love, Vivian Reed." With love. I stared at those flowers until their sweetness turned my stomach. Grant reached for the vase. My mother wanted to send something peaceful. "Peaceful things don't usually arrive after cruel phone calls," I said. His face tightened just a little. There he was, the man under the polish. He set the vase down. "You're under a lot of stress. And that is what certain people say when they want your truth to sound like hysteria." I wrote that down too. Grant present, white lilies from Vivian. He said I was under stress. No apology, no explanation, no fear for Naomi that I could see. When I looked back through the ICU glass, my daughter's hand rested still beneath the blanket. Grant stood beside me, close enough to play husband if anyone passed. But I knew now. They were not waiting for Naomi to wake up. They were waiting for the calendar to give them permission. Ruthie Bell called me at 9:18 that night. I remember the exact minute because I wrote it down before I answered. By then, writing things down had become the only way I could keep my anger from spilling onto the floor. "Miss Etta," Ruthie whispered, "are you somewhere private?" Ruthie had lived across from Naomi for 7 years. She wore bright cardigans, brought pound cake to sick neighbors, and knew more about that street than any security company in Georgia. Naomi used to laugh and say, "Miss Ruthie doesn't watch the neighborhood. The neighborhood reports to her." I stepped away from the ICU doors. I'm alone. There are lights on at Naomi's house. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Grant there?" "I don't know, but there's more than one car. One dark SUV by the curb, one white van in the driveway, and somebody just carried boxes out the side door." The hallway seemed to tilt. "What kind of boxes?" "Small ones, not moving boxes, more like file boxes, the kind with lids." I closed my eyes and saw Naomi's home office, her design files, her contracts, her old sketches, the locked cabinet where she kept tax folders and insurance papers. "Can you take pictures?" I asked. "Already did. Doorbell camera caught some of it, too." That was Ruthie, nervous but not useless. She paused, then lowered her voice even more. "That black SUV, Miss Etta. I saw it before." "When?" 3 nights before Naomi's accident. Parked down the block with the lights off. Same rear dent. Same tinted windows. A cold line ran down my spine. I thanked her and told her not to confront anybody. Then I walked back toward Naomi's room, past vending machines, sleeping relatives, and nurses carrying cups of ice water. Naomi lay still under the white blanket. Her house was awake without her. The next morning, I drove to Sandy Springs before sunrise. The streets were wet, the lawns neat, the kind of quiet that expensive neighborhoods buy and call peace. Naomi's house stood at the bend, with its tall windows dark again. Her Japanese maple leaned over the walkway. The porch light was off. I parked across the street and looked at the front gate. The security camera was gone. Not turned away, not broken, gone. A clean, empty bracket stared back at me like a missing tooth. A young man I did not recognize stepped out carrying a trash bag. When he saw my car, he slowed. I rolled down my window. "What happened to the camera?" He blinked. "Storm knocked it out, ma'am." "Well, there wasn't a storm." "Well, rain was pretty bad." "Well, rain doesn't unscrew brackets." He looked toward the house instead of answering. That told me more than his mouth could. I did not argue. I took a picture of the empty bracket, the driveway, the side door, the tire marks near the curb. Then my phone buzzed. Ruthie had sent 3 images. The first showed a black SUV under the streetlight. The second showed a man carrying a file box out Naomi's side door. The third was blurry, but clear enough for one thing: the rear license plate. I sat there with my engine running, looking at those numbers. Naomi had always loved that house. She picked the wall colors herself, planted rosemary near the kitchen steps, and once told me, "Mama, this is the first place I ever owned where nobody could tell me I was taking up too much room." Now strangers were walking through it while she could not lift her head. I saved every picture twice. Then I texted Ruthie, "Don't open your door to anyone from the Reed family." She replied in less than 10 seconds, "Baby, I wasn't planning to." A nosy neighbor can be a nuisance in ordinary times. In times like those, she can be the witness God leaves across the street. That night I went home for the first time in days. Not because I wanted to leave Naomi, I did not. But my blouse smelled like hospital air. My feet were swollen in my Sunday shoes, and there was something in my bedroom drawer that had been calling my name since Ruthie sent those pictures. My little brick house in Decatur was dark when I pulled in. The porch light had burned out, but I did not have the heart to change it. Inside, everything looked too normal. The mail sat on the table. A dish towel hung over the oven handle. Naomi's picture from college smiled at me from the hallway wall. Young and bright, and unaware of how many wolves learned to wear cologne. I did not turn on the television. I went straight to my bedroom. In the bottom drawer of my dresser, beneath winter scarves and an old church program from my husband's funeral, was a brown envelope with no name on the front. I had kept it there for almost 4 years. My hands knew its weight before my eyes found it. Inside were copies of contracts, emails, handwritten notes, and one faded photograph of a man named Isaiah Freeman. He had owned a small construction company on the south side of Atlanta. Good reputation, good workers, the kind of man who shook your hand and meant it. Years before Naomi met Grant, Isaiah had partnered with Reed Development on a mixed-use project near East Point. At first, his company name was on the early proposals. His crews did foundation work. His contacts helped smooth permits. Then the paperwork changed, quietly. A new LLC appeared, then another. Payment schedules shifted. Ownership language became foggy. By the time Isaiah realized what had happened, his name was no longer where it mattered. He fought until legal fees ate through his savings. Then he settled for less than he was owed, because pride does not pay attorneys by the hour. A young legal assistant, nervous and red-eyed, had given me that envelope 2 weeks before Naomi's wedding. "Mrs. Whitaker," she told me in a grocery store parking lot, "I don't know your daughter.
But if she is marrying into that family, someone should know."
I remembered standing there with a bag of collard greens in one hand and my whole stomach dropping into my shoes. I had read every page. Then I had made the mistake decent people make too often. I told myself maybe it was business bitterness. Maybe Isaiah had misunderstood. Maybe dragging that mess to Naomi would make me look like a mother afraid of losing her child. So I put the envelope away. I let Naomi have her white dress, her vows, her first dance. Now I sat on the edge of my bed, reading those documents again under the yellow lamp. This time I saw the pattern cleanly. Get close. Make the target feel chosen. Create paperwork. Move control through side doors. When challenged, call the victim unstable, greedy, confused, or ungrateful. My phone rang at 11:06. Calvin. "You still awake?"
he asked. Wide as judgment. He sighed.
I found Isaiah Freeman's old case reference. Most of it never reached trial. Settled private. But the LLC names connect to Preston Reed. I looked at the paper spread across my bed. "Calvin, if they did it once, they may have learned how to do it better," he said. After we hung up, I placed Isaiah's documents beside my blue notebook. Old harm next to new harm. Same family, same smell. I thought about calling Naomi's phone, even though I knew she could not answer. I thought about the wedding, about Vivian's tears, about Grant's hand on my daughter's back. Then I thought about that empty camera bracket outside Naomi's house. The Reed family had not invented cruelty for my daughter. They had practiced it. And this time, they had picked the wrong woman's child. On the 10th day, I was rubbing lotion into Naomi's fingers when she moved. Not a twitch from medicine. Not a reflex. Her fingers closed around mine. So light, a stranger might have missed it. But I was her mother. I knew that hand before it ever held a pencil. I knew the little scar near her thumb from when she was 7 and tried to cut an apple by herself. I knew the way her pinky curled when she was tired. I leaned close. "Naomi?" And her eyelids trembled. Slowly, painfully, she opened her eyes. They were cloudy with medicine, but they found me. I pressed my forehead to her hand and breathed like I had been underwater for 10 days. The nurse came in fast, then the doctor. They asked Naomi to blink, squeeze, follow a finger with her eyes. She obeyed slowly, fighting through a body that had become a locked house. When the room settled again, I sat beside her. Her lips moved. I bent down. "Grant," she whispered. One word. It cut me worse than any insult Vivian Reed had thrown. I did not answer right away. I could not bring myself to lie, and I would not break her with the whole truth while pain still owned half her mind. Naomi looked at me. My silence did what my mouth could not. A tear slid from the corner of her eye into her hair. Hours passed before she had strength to speak again. Her voice came thin, dry, scraped raw from tubes and thirst. "Mama, I heard them." "Who, baby?" "Grant, Vivian, kitchen." I reached for my notebook. Naomi's eyes sharpened just enough. "6 weeks ago," she breathed. She said, "before the 30-day mark." I felt the room go still. What else? Naomi swallowed, and the effort made her face tighten. "Account transfer. $9,800. Small enough to excuse, too strange to ignore. I wrote it down. She said insurance needed cleaning up. Grant brought papers, family planning update, and her eyes closed, then opened again. I signed some, not all. Later, PDF looked different. My hand stopped moving. Different how? Page order, beneficiary language, access rights. I saved screenshots. Where? Old work cloud. For the first time in 10 days, the air in that room gave me something besides fear. Naomi had been scared before the crash, but she had not been careless. My daughter had done what smart women do when their heart still wants to trust, but their spirit has started locking doors. She had made notes. She had taken pictures. She had recorded what she could. "Phone gone?" she whispered. I did not want to answer. Her mouth pressed into a faint line. "Grant took it." "Maybe," I said. But we both knew maybe was just a place people rest before they are brave enough to say yes. Naomi's fingers tightened again. "Mama," she said, barely louder than breath. "Don't let them make me helpless." I leaned over her bed, close enough that only she could hear me. "Baby, they mistook stillness for surrender. That was their first mistake."
Nếu bạn đang nghe câu chuyện này, xin hãy để lại một lượt thích và bình luận xem Etta nên làm gì tiếp theo để bảo vệ Naomi. Điều bất ngờ vẫn còn phía trước, và câu hỏi là khi một người phụ nữ tỉnh lại cùng bằng chứng trong tay, nhà Reed còn che giấu được bao lâu? Naomi closed her eyes, exhausted. I stayed beside her, the notebook open, the pen moving. Because my daughter had not only opened her eyes, she had opened the locked door they thought they buried with her silence. The first official lie came wrapped in Grant Reed's soft voice. "I never saw her phone, Mrs. Whitaker." He said it in the hospital hallway with one hand tucked in his coat pocket, looking tired enough for passing nurses to pity him. That was Grant's talent. He could stand beside destruction and look like one more thing it had damaged. I had already called the towing yard that morning. A man named Eddie answered, chewing something loud enough for me to hear it through the phone. "Yes, ma'am," he told me. Personal effects were released to the husband. Wallet, purse, keys, phone, some papers from the glove box. He signed for it. "And you're certain about the phone?" "It listed right here." I asked him to email a copy of the release form. By noon, it was in my inbox. Grant Reed, signature, date, time. So when Grant looked at me and said he never saw her phone, I did not argue. Arguing gives liars a chance to rehearse. I only said, "That's so." His eyes moved once toward Naomi's room. Just once. Enough. That afternoon, Mabel Hargrove arrived. She wore a charcoal suit, low heels, and the expression of a woman who had spent 40 years watching polished men underestimate quiet women. Her silver hair was pulled back neat, and she carried a leather folder that looked older than some attorneys. "Etta," she said, hugging me carefully. Then she looked through the glass at Naomi. For a moment, all the law left her face. "Oh, baby girl," she whispered. Naomi was awake in pieces, drifting in and out. But when she saw Mabel, her eyes filled. Mabel took her hand and said, "You do not have to be strong for me. You only have to be clear." Naomi blinked once. Yes.
Mabel asked short questions, not dramatic ones. Where was the cloud account? What email had she used?
Did anyone else know? Did she remember the password? Naomi gave answers slowly, letter by letter, sometimes stopping when pain pulled her under. I wrote everything down. By evening, Mabel's investigator had accessed the old work cloud from a secure laptop. We did not crowd around like people watching a movie. We stood back, quiet, as if the wrong breath could scare the truth away. There they were, photos of the black SUV, screenshots of the $9,800 transfer, a saved email about insurance beneficiary language Naomi did not remember approving, and one voice memo. The recording crackled at first, a kitchen sound, maybe a cabinet closing. Then Grant's voice, low and irritated. "We only need time." A woman answered, Vivian. "Time is exactly what she will not give us if she keeps digging." No one spoke in the hospital room. Even the machines seemed to lower their voices. Mabel paused the recording and looked at me. "This does not prove everything," she said, "but it proves enough to start protecting her." That was how Mabel worked. She did not dress hope up as victory. She knew courts did not run on feelings, no matter how true those feelings were. Still, I felt something shift. Grant could hide a phone. He could deny a visit. He could let his mother send flowers over insults and call it grace. But he could not reach backward into a cloud account he never knew existed. Later, after Mabel left to make calls, I sat beside Naomi while she slept. Her hand rested open on the blanket, bruised but warm. I thought about every woman who had ever been called confused while men moved money around her. Every mother told to calm down when calm was exactly what dangerous people needed from her. I opened my notebook and wrote one sentence beneath Grant's lie. He took the phone, but he did not take the truth. Then I underlined it until the paper nearly tore. Mabel did not rush to the police that night. That surprised me. Part of me wanted sirens. I wanted Grant dragged out by the collar of that expensive coat Naomi had bought him. I wanted Vivian Reed's Sunday smile wiped clean in front of everybody who had ever praised her peach cobbler and her charity manners. Mabel saw it on my face. "Etta," she said, "anger is honest, but anger is not admissible." We were sitting in a small consultation room near the ICU, the kind with beige walls, a round table, and a box of tissues placed there like a warning. Naomi was resting. A nurse had promised to call me if she stirred. Mabel opened her folder. "We protect Naomi first," she said. "Then we expose them." She wrote 3 lines on a legal pad. Medical authority, financial control, original documents. "Grant is still listed as healthcare power of attorney," she said. "That must be challenged immediately now that Naomi can express her wishes." "Well, she can barely speak." "Well, she spoke enough." Mabel tapped the second line. "The money comes next. We ask the court to freeze any account showing irregular activity until review. Not all accounts, just enough to stop movement without looking reckless." Then she tapped the third, "And we demand the original signed documents. Not copies, not PDFs forwarded by some Reed attorney. Originals." That word carried weight. Originals told stories copies tried to hide. By midnight, Mabel had called a healthcare attorney named Julian Cross, a financial forensics specialist named Dana Pike, and a private investigator who had once worked insurance fraud cases. None of them spoke like television people. They asked dull questions that made my skin prickle. Who had access to Naomi's home office? Who knew her passwords? Did Grant have keys to the file cabinet? Were the doctors Reed family acquaintances? Had Vivian contacted hospital administration? Had any beneficiary change been notarized? I answered what I could. When I could not, I said, "I don't know yet." Mabel nodded every time. Good.
Never fill silence with guesses.
Near dawn, Naomi woke enough to sign a short statement. Her hand shook so badly, Julian had to steady the board beneath the paper, but no one guided her pen. Mabel read every word aloud first. I, Naomi Whitaker Reed, being presently able to understand and communicate my wishes, do not want Grant Reed making medical or financial decisions on my behalf at this time. I request that my mother, Etta Mae Whitaker, and attorney Mabel Hargrove assist in protecting my interests.
Naomi's signature looked like a wounded bird, but it was hers. When she finished, she closed her eyes, exhausted. I bent over her and kissed her forehead. You did good, baby. And her lips barely moved. Don't let him back in. Something inside me hardened so cleanly, it almost felt peaceful. By breakfast, Mabel had enough to begin. Not enough to win everything, not yet, but enough to stop Grant from walking through Naomi's life with a key she no longer wanted him to hold. Before she left, she placed one hand over my notebook. Keep writing. Dates, times, names, exact words. The Reeds have lived a long time on charm. Charm falls apart when it meets a timeline. I looked through the glass at Naomi, pale beneath the hospital lights, but no longer voiceless. In Georgia, prayer can steady a soul, but a court order, filed at the right hour, can stop a greedy hand before it reaches the drawer. The article appeared on a little Atlanta Society blog, 2 days after Mabel filed the first papers. No name on it, of course. People who throw stones from behind curtains always think the curtains make them invisible. The headline read, "Prominent young architect caught between husband and controlling mother after tragic crash." I read it on my phone in the hospital cafeteria, sitting over a tray of eggs I had not touched. The words were dressed up as concern, but I knew a knife when I saw one. It said Naomi's humble background may have left her vulnerable to family pressure. It said her mother had been visibly emotional at the hospital. It said sources close to the Reed family feared Naomi's recovery was being complicated by old resentments. Old resentments. That was a pretty way to say a black mother should know her place. By noon, 2 women from Vivian's church had texted me Bible verses about forgiveness. One left a voicemail saying, "Etta, grief can make us act outside ourselves." I deleted it before the devil made me call her back. Then the hospital administrator asked to speak with me. She was polite, too polite. Her office had a small plant, framed certificates, and a box of tissues that had never seen real sorrow. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said, "we received correspondence from Mr. Reed's attorney." I folded my hands in my lap. "Of course you did." "Well, they express concern that your presence may be causing emotional strain for Mrs. Reed." Mrs. Reed. Not Naomi. not my daughter, Mrs. Reed. I let the silence sit there until the administrator looked down at her papers. "Has Naomi said I distress her?" I asked. "Well, given her condition." "Has she said it?" "No." "Has her doctor said my presence harms her medically?" "No."
Then what you have is a husband who did not ask if his wife was in pain, asking you to remove the mother she asked for by name. The woman's cheeks colored. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Mabel had warned me before she left that morning. "They want you loud," she said. "Do not hand them the picture they came for." And so I stayed still. When I walked back to the ICU, Grant was standing near the nurse's station with a minister beside him. He looked hollow-eyed and noble, like suffering had dressed him for a magazine cover. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said softly, "we all want what's best for Naomi." I stopped close enough that he could hear me, but not close enough for anyone to call it a scene. "Then start by telling the truth about her phone." His mouth tightened. The minister blinked. Grant lowered his voice. "This hostility is not helping her." "No," I said, "but your lies might be hurting her." For 1 second, the mask slipped. Not far, just enough for me to see anger flash behind those gentle eyes. Then he looked past me and sighed, as if I had wounded him. That was his performance. Mine was documentation. At 2:15 p.m., Grant accused me of hostility. At 2:16 p.m., no denial regarding phone. At 2:17 p.m., witness present, minister, name unknown. That evening, Naomi woke while I was sitting beside her. Her voice was barely a thread. "They tryin' you?" I smiled because even broken, my baby knew the weather. "Yes, ma'am." Her fingers moved against the blanket. "Don't bite." "I won't." "Let them leave teeth marks first." I laughed then, quietly, carefully, with tears in my throat. The Reed family wanted me to scream so they could point and call me dangerous. But they had forgotten something every old schoolteacher knows. The loudest child in the room is not always the one who started the fight. Monica chose a diner off Ponce de Leon, the kind with cracked red booths, strong coffee, and waitresses who called every woman Hun, no matter what she drove. I got there 10 minutes early and sat facing the door. Old habit. When Monica walked in, she looked nothing like the woman from charity luncheons. No cream dress, no pearls, no soft laugh floating beside Preston Reed. She wore jeans, a gray sweater, and sunglasses she did not take off until she sat across from me. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said. "Monica." And her hands wrapped around the coffee mug like it was the only warm thing left in Georgia. "I don't have much time." "Well, then don't waste it." She flinched. Good. Truth should not always arrive on a cushion. Monica looked toward the window, then back at me. "Preston is in trouble, not just business trouble, debt, bad loans, projects that never should have started. They've been moving money through companies I didn't even know existed." "Companies with your name on them?" Her face went pale. So that was yes. "He told me it was for tax planning," she whispered. "Then I saw one of the loan documents. My signature was there, Mrs. Whitaker, but I don't remember signing it." I did not comfort her. Not yet. "What does that have to do with Naomi?" Monica swallowed hard. Naomi's assets were supposed to stabilize everything. Her house, her firm shares,
her investment accounts. Grant kept saying once he had temporary authority, they could restructure the pressure. Restructure the pressure. Men who steal in suits always have clean phrases for dirty work. "Who is Troy Maddox?" I asked. Her eyes lifted fast. That told me enough. He used to do repossessions, private security too. Preston used him when tenants wouldn't leave quietly or equipment needed to disappear from job sites. And Naomi's accident? Monica pressed a trembling hand against her mouth. I heard Vivian say, "If Naomi keeps digging, we all go under." Grant said, "Troy can handle the road." For a second, the diner noise faded. Plates, coffee, the bell over the door, all of it dropped behind the blood rushing in my ears. "Do you have proof?" She reached into her purse and slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a printed photograph, blurry, taken from a distance, but I could see Grant, Vivian, and a thick-necked man beside a black SUV with tinted windows. "When?" I asked. 3 days before the crash. I put the photo in my folder. Monica's voice cracked. "I have a son, Mrs. Whitaker. Preston put my name on things. If this goes federal, I can lose everything." "Oh, there it is," I said. She stared at me. "The truth. You didn't come because they hurt Naomi. You came because the fire reached your curtains." Her eyes filled, but she did not deny it. "No," she said, "I'm not innocent, but I'm not going down for Vivian Reed." That sounded more honest than any prayer I had heard from that family. I stood, leaving enough cash for both coffees. "Then you'd better be ready to say it to someone with a badge or a bar card." Monica looked smaller in that booth than she had any right to look. Will Naomi survive this? I looked at the envelope in my hand. She already has. Now we're deciding who survives the truth. Outside, Atlanta traffic moved under a gray sky, ordinary as ever. People honked, cursed, turned left where they should not. Life kept going, even when someone handed you the shape of an attempted ruin in a diner booth. I drove back to the hospital with Monica's photograph on the passenger seat. The Reed family had finally started leaking from the inside. Mabel filed the emergency petition before sunrise. She did not dress it up with outrage. She laid it out like a table set for judgment. Grant's early paperwork, the $9,800 transfer, the missing phone, Ruthie's photos, Monica's statement, Naomi's cloud files, the voice memo where Grant said they only needed time. Every piece had its place. By 10:40 that morning, we were in a courtroom that smelled faintly of old wood and copier toner. Naomi could not be there, but Julian Cross had arranged for her physician's statement and a short video recording. In it, Naomi looked pale, bruised, and exhausted, but her eyes were steady. "I understand what I am saying," she whispered on the screen. "I do not want Grant Reed making decisions for me." Grant sat 2 rows ahead of me, with Vivian on one side and his attorney on the other. Vivian wore navy blue and pearls, dressed like a woman attending a scholarship luncheon instead of defending the wreckage of her own morals. When Naomi's video played, Grant lowered his head, not in shame, in calculation. The judge, a gray-haired woman with sharp glasses, looked over the documents for a long time. "Mrs. Hargrove," she said, "a valid power of attorney is not set aside lightly." No, Your Honor, Mabel said. Nor should a woman's rights be handed to a man actively preparing to benefit from her incapacity. Grant's attorney rose, smooth as butter on a hot biscuit. My client is a devastated husband. These accusations are inflammatory, speculative, and fueled by Mrs. Whitaker's hostility toward the Reed family.
There I was again, the problem, the angry mother, the poor woman who could not stand her daughter marrying up. Mabel did not even look back at me. Your Honor, she said, Mrs. Whitaker did not create the towing release form. She did not create the account transfer. She did not remove the security camera. She did not record Mr. Reed's voice saying he only needed time. The judge's eyes moved to Grant. For the first time, I saw sweat near his temple. Mabel continued, We are asking for narrow relief. Temporary suspension of Mr. Reed's medical authority. Limited freeze on accounts showing irregular movement. Court review for transactions above $9,500. Production of original estate, insurance, and power documents. The judge leaned back. Vivian stared straight ahead, but her hand tightened around her purse clasp. After a silence long enough to make every guilty person age, the judge spoke. Granted in part. My breath stopped. Grant's medical authority was temporarily suspended. Naomi's expressed wishes would control her care. Certain accounts would be frozen pending review. Any transaction above $9,500 required court approval. Original documents had to be produced. Not everything, but enough. Enough to keep Grant from walking into Naomi's life with a key and calling it marriage. Outside the courtroom, Vivian turned toward me. This is not over, Etta. I looked at her pearls, her perfect lipstick, her face trained by decades of being obeyed. No, I said, but it is recorded now. Her eyes hardened. That was the thing about people like Vivian Reed. They feared scandal more than sin. They could live with wrongdoing. What terrified them was paperwork proving it. Mabel touched my elbow. Come on, she said. We need to get back to Naomi. As we walked out, I thought of the 30-day clock Grant had been counting on. Mabel had not smashed it. She had simply reached inside, found the battery, and pulled it loose. Grant arrived that afternoon wearing the camel coat Naomi bought him for their second anniversary. I remembered because Naomi had called me from Lenox Square, laughing about the price. "Mama, don't fuss," she said. "It's his gift." Now he wore it into her hospital room like a costume. Vivian came behind him in a gray wool suit, her hair pinned neat, her mouth pressed into that church lady line women use when they want cruelty to look like concern. Their attorney followed with a leather briefcase and the tight expression of a man who had read bad news twice. I stood beside Naomi's bed. Mabel stood near the window. Julian Cross placed the court order on the rolling table, right next to Naomi's water cup. "Mr. Reed," Julian said, "as of this morning, your medical authority is temporarily suspended. Mrs. Reed's expressed wishes control her care. Any communication about her treatment goes through counsel unless she chooses otherwise." Grant looked at Naomi, not at the machines, not at the bruises, her. "Naomi," he said softly, "baby." This has gone too far. Her eyes opened. Weak, yes, but not lost. Vivian stepped forward. "We are trying to protect this family." Mabel's voice cut in clean.
Mrs. Reed is not taking visitors who speak over her. Vivian turned to me. You have poisoned her. I almost smiled. That woman still thought I had enough power to poison what Grant had already broken. Naomi's fingers moved against the blanket. I leaned close. She wanted the bed raised. The nurse adjusted it slowly. Pain crossed Naomi's face, but she did not make a sound. Grant watched, and for the first time, he looked uncomfortable. Not sorry, just uncomfortable, being forced to witness damage he could not talk around. Naomi breathed through it. Then she looked at him. You lost the right, she whispered, to speak for me. The room held still. When you stopped asking if I was alive. Grant's face emptied. Vivian said, Naomi, you are medicated. Naomi turned her eyes to her mother-in-law. And you are scared. That one sentence did what shouting never could. It found the bone. Vivian's attorney touched her sleeve, warning her without words. Grant took half a step back. The camel coat suddenly looked too warm, too expensive, too borrowed from a life he no longer owned. I looked at my daughter and saw something rise in her that the accident had not crushed. Not strength like people put on greeting cards. Something harder. Authority. Naomi could not walk, could barely speak, could not lift a cup without help. But she had taken back the room. Julian gathered the papers. This visit is over unless Mrs. Reed requests otherwise. Naomi closed her eyes. That was answer enough. Vivian moved first, stiff as a woman leaving a sanctuary after hearing her name in the sermon. Grant lingered at the foot of the bed. Naomi, he said, almost pleading now. She did not open her eyes. I walked to the door and held it wide. For years, the Reed family had entered rooms expecting people to make space. That day, I watched them leave one. 3 days after the court order, Troy Maddox disappeared. At least that was what Preston Reed told people. He's probably scared, Preston said through his attorney. Troy acted independently. Nobody in the family authorized anything. Independently. That word traveled fast once rich people realized prison had a zip code. Dana Pike, the forensic accountant working with Mabel, spread documents across a conference table in Julian Cross's office downtown. Bank records, LLC registrations, insurance filings, transfer histories moving through Georgia, Florida, and Delaware, like money trying to outrun daylight. Dana tapped one page with a red nail. See this? She said. Funds moved from a development account into a shell LLC tied to Preston. Then debt payments were quietly covered using short-term liquidity from accounts linked to Naomi's projected authority structure. I stared at her. She sighed gently. They were planning around access to Naomi's assets before she ever crashed. The room went cold. Not desperate after the accident, prepared before it. Isaiah Freeman came in that afternoon carrying an old leather folder worn pale at the corners. He looked older than the photo from my envelope, shoulders bent by years and disappointment. They did the same dance with me, he said. He laid out contracts, early drafts, handwritten meeting notes, and emails from Reed Development. At first, his name appeared everywhere. Then, gradually, nowhere. You ever notice, Isaiah said quietly, people like them never steal all at once? They shave you down little by little until one day you realize there's nothing left
with your name on it. Dana compared Isaiah's records with Naomi's documents. Same language patterns, same LLC structure, same strategy of temporary control turning permanent once confusion settled in. Patterns. Courts loved patterns. That evening, Monica called me, crying so hard I almost could not understand her. "Preston says this is all Grant's fault now," she gasped. "Vivian wants everybody quiet. They're saying Troy misunderstood instructions." I sat in the hospital room while Naomi slept beside me, listening to another Reed family member discover loyalty had expiration dates. "And what does Grant say?" I asked. "He says he never meant for Naomi to get hurt that badly." Though there it was, not denial, measurement. Not that it didn't happen, that it went too far. Monica whispered, "Mrs. Whitaker, they're turning on each other." Of course they were. A family held together by image can survive gossip. It cannot survive evidence. The next morning, investigators located the black SUV through repair invoices outside Macon. Front-end damage repaired one day after Naomi's crash. Paid through a company connected to Preston. Troy Maddox still had not surfaced, but his shadow had. Grant arrived at the hospital near sunset, looking thinner than before. The confidence had begun leaking out of him around the eyes. For a moment, standing outside Naomi's room, he looked almost ordinary. Just another frightened man who had followed greed farther than he expected. "They're blaming me," he said quietly. I kept my arms folded. "Did they force you to marry her too?" His jaw tightened. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." There are sentences that should never be spoken beside a hospital bed. That was one of them. Inside the room, Naomi slept through the conversation, one hand curled lightly against the blanket. Grant looked through the glass at her. Then he said the truest thing I had ever heard from his mouth. "My mother will sacrifice anybody to survive." I nodded once. "Yes," I said. "She just finally ran out of strangers." Grant asked to meet me at the restaurant inside the Westin near Peachtree Plaza. Not his attorney, not Vivian, just him. He looked exhausted when he sat down across from me. No polished shoes this time, no church boy smile. Just a man discovering that greed charges interest long after the money is gone. "I never wanted Naomi dead," he said immediately. "People tell on themselves fastest when guilt is driving." I stirred cream into my coffee. "What did you want?" He stared at the table. "We just needed time. Preston was drowning. Projects were collapsing. Investors were asking questions. My mother thought if Naomi stopped digging into the accounts long enough, we could stabilize things." Stabilize. Another clean word for rot. Grant rubbed both hands over his face. "Troy was supposed to scare her. Maybe force her off the road a little. Delay things. Create confusion until the 30-day clause activated." I felt my stomach turn cold. "But it rained harder than expected," he whispered. "She lost control." Lost control? As if my daughter had simply misplaced her future somewhere on the wet pavement. I leaned forward. "The problem with people like you," I said quietly, "is that you keep calling this a mistake because it happened to somebody you loved." Grant looked at me then, eyes red and hollow. "With Naomi," I said, "this was her life." And he had no answer for that. 2 weeks later, federal investigators searched Vivian Reed's home at 7:30 in the morning. No dramatic television raid, no screaming neighbors, just dark jackets, government vehicles, and quiet men carrying out banker boxes while curtains twitched all over the neighborhood. Atlanta society moved faster than any virus after that. Vivian's name disappeared from charity boards. Church committees suddenly restructured leadership. Fundraising invitations stopped arriving. People who once kissed both her cheeks at galas now cross streets pretending not to see her. That is the cruel thing about reputation. It leaves rich people slower than money, but once it starts walking away, it rarely turns around. Naomi healed inch by inch. No miracle, no movie scene. First she moved 2 fingers. Then she sat upright, without vomiting from pain. Then she stood between parallel bars in physical therapy while sweat soaked the back of her hospital gown. The first day, she managed 3 shaky steps. I turned my face toward the window and pretended to admire the weather, because my child hated being looked at like tragedy. Her voice came back before her strength did. She gave hours of statements, identified emails, confirmed signatures that had been altered after review drafts, unlocked the cloud records herself. One by one, the legal walls closed around the Reeds. Grant's authority was permanently revoked. The financial powers were voided. Naomi regained complete control of her accounts, property, company shares, and legal representation. And 8 months after the crash, she walked back into her house, slowly, with a cane in one hand and me beside her. Ruthie Bell stood across the street pretending to check her mail for the 4th time in 10 minutes. Mabel waited near the doorway, dignified as ever. The late afternoon sun spilled through the tall windows Naomi once showed Grant with pride. Naomi rested her fingers against the foyer wall. "I picked this paint color myself," she said softly. "Yes, you did." And for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Naomi looked at me. "Mama, did Vivian really think you'd stop?" I thought about the hospital hallways, the missing phone, the lilies, the courtroom, the lies wrapped in soft voices. Then I looked around the home my daughter had fought her way back into, with scars on her spine and steel in her spirit. "No," I said. "She just made the mistake of thinking love makes women weak." Naomi smiled then, small, tired, real. And in that house the Reed family nearly stole, with paperwork, fear, and polished lies. 2 black women stood breathing inside something they had protected with memory, evidence, stubbornness, and truth. Sometimes justice does not arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks back through its own front door on shaking legs and refuses to leave again. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like for the channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to know where you're listening from and what lesson stayed with you most. Thank you for spending this time with us. Take care of yourselves, stay strong, and we'll see you again soon on Voices of Aunt Etta.